Okay, so thank you, everybody. I'd like to call to order the, oh, excuse me, Monica.
I apologize, Susan. I think just give Hannah a moment to start the recording.
Please.
Of course, we are recording. You're good to go, Susan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to call to order the Issaquah Human Services Commission meeting for Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. Welcome all, and it is 6:36 p.m. So thank you for your attendance tonight. And the first issue on our agenda is a call to order of the commission membership, and I believe that we have one excused absence, who is Jaime, and but other than that, everyone is in attendance. So are we okay, Hannah, with not going around for roll call for this meeting?
Yes, we are okay moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And so the next item on the agenda is, sorry, just trying to get squared away here, is public comments. So I guess a question for Hannah for tonight, do we have anyone in attendance who would like to make public comments, or are you aware of other previously submitted public comments for tonight?
We have one attendee in attendance tonight. This is our intern for Human Services, Alex, but no public comments at this time.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is our approval of minutes, and included in your packet tonight is a copy of the minutes from our last meeting, which was December 15th, 2021. And I would ask, if folks haven't had a chance to look through it, if you would take a look through those minutes and then indicate, let's try via raising of hands, if you have any corrections or edits to those minutes as presented. I'll give folks a minute to do that. In the meantime, I have one suggestion that I would like to make, and that is on the list of attendees for that commission meeting. Hannah, the listed attendees, sorry, I'm trying to scroll to get there, needs to be updated. Please to make sure that we don't list Brooke Frazier, who is our former youth board representative, who's no longer with the commission. And I believe that there was at least one commissioner who was not in attendance that night. If we could update that according to the recording and reflect that, that would be appreciated. And
this is Claire Hansen.
Yes,
this is Claire Hansen. I agree with that, and I was not present.
That's another edit. Thank you very much. Any other comments, corrections to the minutes as presented? Okay, well, so I am seeking approval of the minutes with the corrections. Oh, excuse me, Pat, you had an edit or suggestion?
Yes, it is actually more of a question, and then we can approve. So usually, sometimes when I read the minutes, there is something there's an allusion to something that was done, but there's no specifics about that. Is it purposefully? For instance, they say we had reviewed the vision and we had suggestions, or we were gonna do, but nothing was said about what was the correct wording. Is that purposefully?
Yeah, and Monica, I think if you wouldn't mind addressing that.
Yes, thank you so much. The minutes are what we call just action minutes. So we would provide details only for something that there was an action, like a voting on. Other than that, there's just a brief high-level summary provided for minutes. And so that has been the norm with all boards and commissions for the city. And especially now that there's also a recording, if anyone's interested in additional information, they can always review the recording.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great question.
Great. Any other comments on the minutes? Okay, so I would like to seek approval by unanimous consent of the minutes as presented in of December 15, 2021, as presented in our packet tonight, with the updating of the attendee list as discussed. And I am asking for any objections to that. And seeing none, the minutes are approved as presented with those edits. So thank you very much. And we're going to go ahead then and move on into the next section of tonight's agenda, which is the staff report.
Hey, Susan, sorry, before we step forward, I saw you probably missed a few hands go up, and so I wanted to open the floor one more time. I saw Claire and Anna's hand both wanted to make a comment.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry about that.
I just wanted to own that I made an erroneous comment earlier and that I was at that December meeting. I was looking at the wrong agenda when I was like, oh my God, are they talking about and so I just wanted to say I'm sorry about that. And of course, I'm embarrassed that it's on the recording, but there you go.
And then Anna.
I'm sorry, my computer is possessed and it's kicking me out. So I'll be trying to stay in touch and logging back. But in the minutes, Susan, on page, the second page. I don't know if you guys mentioned it while I was trying to log back. Human Services Strategic Contact Review. I wrote down to add the word plan there. That's the only comment I have for the minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Monica, did you get that? And Hannah?
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Again, want to leave time if anybody else has anything that they wanted to add? Okay. Well, thank you very much. So again, with those much appreciated comments and edits and updates, thank you very much. So I'm again seeking unanimous approval by unanimous consent of the minutes as presented and with the edits that we have discussed. And any objections to that consent? Okay, seeing none, the minutes are approved with those edits as we discussed. All right, thank you very much. Now moving on into the next agenda item for this evening, and that is a staff report presented by Monica and Hannah.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Monica Negrillo. My starting, I believe, the staff report. We just have a very brief, actually, on the council and mayor report. I don't think we have any updates, I believe, for tonight.
So then I can step in if that's okay, Monica.
Please do so.
Great. So just wanted to provide a Human Service and Commission update in regards to our severe weather emergency response. As you all know, we experienced some extreme weather with great snowfall. And so it lasted between December 23rd through January 5th. And in that time, the City of Issaquah and Human Services, we sheltered 20 people in Motel 6, offered a few others transported to local shelters. And in that, we provided daily check-ins, providing additional case management services, provided transportation for hospitalizations for a few who needed some medical treatment, and provided food as well as a few other basic needs, as well as long-term services that a lot of them needed, such as IDs or stepping forward with housing, or anything like that. So that was a overall very successful severe weather response for the City of Issaquah. So I wanted to provide just a overview of that. You can find more details in the staff report. Thank you. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you. And so that was staff report from the Community Human Services update. So there was nothing else under this item that you wanted to cover tonight, Hannah or Monica?
That's
I'm
Evan's
just
brain.
gonna say, I think on our end, the item that's under council meeting, actually it's our main agenda item. So it's gonna be feedback from council on the Human Services Strategic Plan. So if that's okay with you, we can just talk about it at the agenda item.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'll just make a quick comment on what Hannah just mentioned, the incredible service that the city and the Human Services team provided to our fellow residents during this very difficult time was again extraordinary and very appreciated by City Council, as mentioned during the discussion of the Human Services Commission or Human Services Draft Strategic Plan, which is our main topic for tonight. So again, kudos to Monica and Hannah and the team for the incredible effort around that. And again, sharing our appreciation for what you all do to keep us, keep our fellow citizens safe. So thank you. Okay, so then we're moving on to the next agenda item and really the main discussion agenda for tonight, which is the draft Human Services Strategic Plan review. And this will take up the bulk of our discussion, and we hope that you've had a chance to look over the document, and if you've had time, even the recording of the presentation made by Monica on behalf of staff to the City Council study session. I think it was extremely well done, and I hope that you get a chance to take a look at that and listen to the comments. There were some interesting comments that we received from City Council that I know will be, make for some interesting discussion points tonight. And one of the things that Monica and Hannah are asking for is some additional contributions, thinking perspectives from this commission. And we've already started talking about that. We've already had at least one discussion of the content, and we have another opportunity tonight to share our thoughts before this very important work moves forward to its next phase. So I'd like to turn it over to Hannah and Monica to take us through this next section.
Thank you very much, Susan. This is Monica. Before we do that, I see Hannah. I apologize. I see Anna's hand up. I don't know if you wanted to make a comment before we start.
Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I would like to ask, how are we gonna give input to corrections or questions that we, how's it gonna be? Otherwise, one person was gonna take 1 hour, or not have chance to give you input or email you guys later. How are we gonna do that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's exactly what we are. It's a good segue to exactly we are going to talk about for the rest of the evening. So definitely opportunity to provide feedback tonight, verbally. Also, if there's additional and more content feedback, we definitely welcome emails. We also welcome opportunities to meet individually with us. There is a community workshop happening next week. And then again, we just invited the large community, like if anyone cannot make any of the workshops or cannot email us, just to contact us, and we would be happy to set up a time and meet one-on-one. So definitely opportunities to provide feedback are now. We will take feedback and community input until February 4th. After that, we will incorporate the feedback and go back to come back to you. Hopefully, we will discuss that a little bit later, and then go back to City Council on February 15th. So a lot happening in the next 3-4 weeks here. And we are very, very grateful for your time and commitment on this. Definitely it is very important project, and also pretty big project, if I may say so, as one of the staff working on it. So with that, with your permission, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully for tonight, we'll go through a presentation for the next 10 or so minutes. And after that, we will open it up for discussion. Susan, I believe you have something else.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. So in addition to those opportunities to provide feedback that you just outlined, we also talked about a a potential process that we might employ tonight. For any of you who have listened in to any of the city council study sessions or even city council meetings, they actually employ a process where they have a period of question and answer and then a period of commentary. We didn't know that we needed to be that strict here with our own commission, but we did want to try something where we essentially go around the room. It doesn't have to be in any particular order, but we would like to hear what everyone has to say. And we'd like to hear your questions. We'd like to hear your comments. And then we'll go back and have a discussion around those particular points. I think what that could do is help folks sort of collect their thoughts, prioritize the comments that they would like to make sure that everyone is heard. And then we'll leave plenty of time for sort of organic discussion after we do that process. So with Monica and Hannah's support, I think we would like to try that tonight and see how that goes. So I'm not going to, whoever feels so compelled can, raise your hand and we'll kind of, take them as we see them. But be prepared if you, if you haven't had a chance to speak up or, share your thoughts or your questions, that will likely come to you before we then go back for more general further discussion. So thank you. Okay, so with that, back to you, Monica, for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Susan. And allow me a moment, please, to share my screen. I'm sorry, Hannah, I'm not sure if I have the right.
Do you not see it at the bottom?
I do, but it only allows me to share files that are, it just, I apologize, it just doesn't give me. If you're able to share,
I can share.
please do so. Okay, thank you. It would just not allow me to share. I could only do a whiteboard thing or.
I need to switch my setting.
Thank you. And so while Hannah is doing that, commissioners, you might have heard this already. We started this process back in July. So it is a 6-month worth process, a long process. This was a staff-led process. Often strategic plan work is done in collaboration with a consultant. So the consultant takes often on the bulk of the work. In this case, we decided to go with city staff leading the project. So it is the result of our work. Hannah did an amazing job in conducting 99% of the interviews with community partners. We also had the other human services staff, Marisol and Amir, help with outreach to communities who don't speak English or to those who are homeless. So definitely it was boots on the ground work from all of us here. So we appreciate your support with that for sure. Hannah, if you don't mind, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So for tonight, we are returning to you, commissioners, to provide you an overview of this draft strategic plan that now is, you might have seen it, is out for public comment and review, including and especially would love to hear from you as the Human Services Commission. And so tonight we would like to seek input on that draft document. Next slide, please. Specifically, the 3 questions that we are posing to you tonight are really high level. What are your questions as you read through the strategic plan, through the draft? What are your questions? What are perhaps some areas that are not so clear to you? Anything that comes to you as a question. What are your general impressions? Are we headed in the right direction with this? And then just we are ready to take notes, provide input and recommendations on ways to make it better before this gets finalized and adopted, hopefully next month. Next slide, please. So just a brief summary of the touch points that we had with the Human Services Commission. If you may remember, back in July, we came and had a very brief high-level overview of, at that point, we were just sharing the fact that we are starting to work on this plan and just provided our intent. And we told you that we are going to come back to you. Then later on, as we started community engagement, we came back to you with as we work towards the middle, the end of the community engagement process, we came back to you with a summary of what we've done up to that point, and you provided great feedback on who else should we include, and making sure that we did include the communities of color and those who are most disadvantaged in our community engagement process. So that was great feedback from you. Then we also came back in the fall, once we conducted a workshop, once we had the needs, the community needs identified, and we came and presented to the focus areas. We then later came back and also asked input on the equity lens. We had last month a conversation also on the vision statement and content review. Next slide, please. Talking about the overview that we provided, kind of like our plan with the Human Services Strategic Plan, our plan with the plan. Our really goal and intent with the strategic plan was really to create it so it can inform the priorities in human services for the next 5 years. We are also hoping that the plan will guide our investments and allocations of funds in human services. Since, you know, a big lift and the big role of this commission is to really make recommendations for funding allocations. And so we were hoping that one of the purposes of the strategic plan would be to also guide those investments. We are also hoping that the Human Services Strategic Plan is going to provide a roadmap for what policy decisions need to be made in human services in the next 5 years. And you might have seen as you read the plan, you know, we proposed some policies, for example, on homelessness, but that's just one example, not exclusively homelessness, right? And then also we are hoping that the plan will inform advocacy and other technical assistance needs for human services in general for our field in Issaquah. Next slide, please. So high-level overview of the community engagement summary. We conducted surveys and we had nearly 250 respondents to that. As you may recall, we had surveys in English, Spanish, and Chinese. We conducted over 50 interviews. We had 7 focus groups and 6 community workshops. This was with a variety of ages and variety of community members. We engaged with youth and adults, working adults and seniors, with non-English speakers, diverse communities, and various socioeconomic communities. So we really try to engage with a wide range of community members. Next slide, please, Hannah. As you may recall, as we heard from the community members and we engaged with everyone, based on the trends that we heard, we organized the information and the needs that we heard in the community in 4 different themes. These were physical and behavioral health, the housing continuum, which includes housing affordability and homelessness. We included community resources, which includes quite a wide variety of resources, in particular basic needs and food. And then also last but not least, language access and culture specific services were called out. We also came and discussed with you our approach to applying an equity lens. Summarizing that, in human services, we always focus on populations that are most impacted by human services needs. And so our focus really would be on those who live in poverty in Issaquah. As a brief statistical data, about 7.8% of the population in Issaquah live in poverty. So with that focus, we also worked on identifying who are disproportionately impacted by human services needs in Issaquah. By diving deeper into the data, we identified that among those who live in poverty, there's a disproportionate representation of communities living in poverty who are non-white. So out of those who live in poverty, 77% are non-white. They are in particular folks who identify as Hispanic or Latino, or as they identify as another race. And then based on the information, we called out this information in the plan, and then we proposed goals and interventions that help address those inequities. Next slide, please, Ina. So that was our approach in the plan. And then we discussed this briefly last month as well. These are the content areas in the strategic plan. We start by description of who we are as a city. We start with high-level city characteristics and demographics. We highlight our commitment to equity and our approach that I just mentioned. And then we go from general to more particular in describing human services, our roles and functions. We call those out. Following that, we talk about the purpose and provide an overview of the strategic plan and how that was developed, what are our guiding principles, and we describe the community engagement that we conducted. Next, we go into describing what we learned from the community. Here, we focus on not only on what the needs are, but we also highlight what are the existing social services and what are the community partners in Issaquah. And then once we highlight that, we dive deeper into the community needs and provide information on what we learned. And so that is a good segue then to the next topic in the strategic plan, which is really where are we going and what are the goals and actions. So now that we know what's available, what are the resources in the community, what are the needs, then that helped us identify goals and focus areas and the approach and specific action steps that we would need to take to address those needs. We talk a little bit a high-level approach about the funding process. We are going to talk a little bit in more detail about this in a few minutes. And then about the need for partnerships and connections. And then we end with how are we going to measure and what are the outcome measures, and how are we going to I'm trying to look for another word for measuring measures, measuring outcome measures, and that's it. Next slide, please. This is a more detailed visual on how kind of like the entire plan flows. This is an area that we are hoping for the final plan to have a more clear or a more attractive visual. That's going to be we are working with some graphic design staff who's going to help us put some words into some visual components to kind of like show the entire human services strategic plan on one page. So it starts with the vision, kind of like having the vision at the foundation. I'm going to come back to this to talking about the vision too in just a few minutes. Starting with the vision as a foundation, and then focusing on the themes or the priorities in human services, identifying the specific goals, and then diving specifically into what are the strategic approaches and how are we going to address those goals, and then what are some of the measurable steps. As you might have seen and heard us before, excuse me, we are using the SMART model, as specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time limited, to identify those very specific action items, action steps. Excuse me, next slide, please. This is an example of a goal. You also saw this last month, and you have seen probably all the goals that are identified in the draft plan. So I'm not going to spend much time on this. We can certainly talk about it. Next slide, please, Hannah. And then really in summarizing the strategic actions that you have in the draft plan, really we focus on 4 things. On one end, we want to expand new services in Issaquah, as you might have seen, one of the needs, and also it's also one of the reasons going to help you understand what we propose in the vision statement is that there's really a lack of services in Issaquah, and so that's why our hope is for a broad array or for a broad range of human social services in Issaquah. So one strategic action is to really expand on that. Second one is to really sustain existing services. So we don't want to just bring in new services, but we want to help sustain and develop existing services. Third, we want to facilitate the community access to existing services. As you might have seen, one of the trends was that even though we understand that they are limited resources, but even for the resources that they do exist, often community members are just not aware of them. So then we want to intentionally facilitate that community access to those existing and new services. And then with that, of course, prioritize equity, culture, and language access. So really that's kind of like in 3 words, that's the gist of the strategic plan. I mentioned the financial impact, and if you might have seen, this was also one of the feedback that we received from City Council. We are going to dive a little bit deeper in that, on providing some information on budget and financial information, what the strategic plan cost may be. So we are definitely going to work on that prior to the next council meeting. But really, in summarizing the draft plan, we believe that all of the action items that we propose can be addressed either with existing human services staffing resources or with funds provided by the Human Services Grants Program. We also have a few initiatives that require additional one-time or ongoing funding sources, and that would not be limited to just the city budget, but that may be also looking for grants or federal relief funds, county, state, private donations, or other funding sources. We know that as a city, we cannot do it alone, right? So we are going to need to identify additional resources. Next slide, please. And so on to feedback provided by City Council. Really, if you had a chance to see it, I think we received some great comments, and we really appreciated it that Council was supportive, and generally I think they felt that we were in the right direction. So we had some kudos there for sure. I'm gonna move on though to focus a little bit on really what the recommendations were, where our work needs to focus on. So specifically, we received feedback that we should call out Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank for the specific resources and basic needs. I think on that, definitely we are going to work on that and calling it out specifically. We do have it under community resources and especially under basic needs, but we did not call out Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank specifically. That is definitely a very easy fix. Some council member was concerned about the over focus on services for homelessness versus perhaps those are who mentioned the working poor. So recommendation there to broaden service access. Again, we are going to work on that and just making it more clear in the plan, and just reviewing all the strategic actions to make sure that they're all measurable. And then also including some of the existing citywide performance metrics in measuring those outcomes. So all of these recommendations very well received, very much appreciated, and those we are going to work on incorporating or clarifying those before they go back to council. Next slide, please, Hannah. I want to go back and talk a little bit about the vision, but let's talk about timing, and then I want to just make a couple of comments about the vision before I open the conversation up for discussion. So in terms of timing and next steps, as we mentioned, our community engagement process will end on February 15 when we go back to City Council for another conversation. As we mentioned just earlier, on January 25th, we have a community workshop. We invited all of our nonprofit partners and we invited the community at large. This is basically a listening session for us where we would just like, similar like tonight, we would just like to hear from the community, take notes on what their input is, and so then we can implement or respond to their feedback. We would like to propose, and we are going to talk about this at the end of the meeting, we would like to propose a special Human Services Commission meeting either for February 9th or 10th. This would be to replace the meeting that we have on February, I believe the meeting scheduled now for February is February 16th. And that would be right the day after the council meeting. And so we would love the Human Services Commission to have a chance to see the more final strategic plan before it goes back to City Council for a final review. So we are going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the meeting, but that's our proposal. We would love to have one of the conversations with you tonight about that. As mentioned, council study session on February 15, and depending on council feedback on that day, we hope to come back to City Council either on February 22nd or on March 2nd for adoption. That will give us enough time to have the strategic plan adopted by March 14, which is the day when the Human Services grant cycle applications open. Next slide, please, Hannah. I'm talking so fast and so much. I apologize. I'm going to stop here soon. So our discussion for tonight, the 3 questions are on here for you. If you don't mind though, Hannah, I would love to pause and talk about the vision for just a moment. If you don't mind going back to the slide that has the vision statement on some point, I think it is the one with the plan on a page, the one before. There you go. So we received great input from you last month, and we so appreciate the input that we received. One of the first ones that I recall was that we want the vision to be aspirational and to be in the future instead of a present statement. I think the initial statement was Issaquah is a welcoming community. We decided definitely we believe that this one is it is more aspirational because it states that we want and our vision for Issaquah is to be a welcoming. We decided not to go with Issaquah strives to be because really our vision, it's not for Issaquah to strive to be something. Our vision for Issaquah is to be something, and so that's why we decided to go with that, and we hope that that's okay with you. Also, I think we made changes. There was broad spectrum. I don't recall exactly the wording, but there was a slight different wording on that. Might have been broad range. I think, Lucrecia, we so appreciate you provided great wording alternatives. So I think we went with what you provided there, spectrum. Also, the word that you provided for every person being respected. I think the initial word there was essential, and so we did some wordsmithing, not completely different. Definitely, I think if the commission would like to continue to provide input on the vision, we would certainly welcome it, and we would love to have other alternatives. At this point, this is what's the working vision, and again, I think the information behind it and the reasoning behind it is that really our vision was threefold. we wanted to make sure that we do have a wide range of social services in Issaquah. We currently have social services in Issaquah. We don't have the wide range of services that I think the community needs and wants. And so that was one of the aspirational goals. We want to make sure that also every person, whether they're non-English speakers, whether they're homeless or whether they are working poor, that every person really is respected, is essential, and it's really valued in the community. We did hear community members telling us that they don't feel welcome, they don't feel valued, and so that's why we added that part in there. And then the third aspirational goal was really, as a city and our human services division, new division, we want to make sure that all of those basic needs are met, and it's a shared responsibility between us and the community. So kind of like that was the intent that went behind it. And once again, we so appreciate the feedback that we received from you. And again, whether it's tonight or whether it's via email, until February 4th, we gladly accept additions to this. But more than anything, we would love to focus on discussing the draft plan. So if you don't mind, Hannah, we can now go back to just those. I'm gonna reread those questions for you tonight, and then we can take it off the screen. We can also put the questions in the chat. So what are your questions regarding the Human Services Strategic Plan? And what are your general impressions? Are we heading in the right directions? And then providing really any input and recommendations. With that, I'm gonna stop. Thank you for sharing, Hannah. And we are available for questions.
Thank you, Monica. And in order to open that up, so you have a whiteboard, is that what you've presented?
No, I'm trying. I think that's the one that I was trying to. There you go.
There we go.
That was the only thing that I could share earlier, so I apologize. Thank you. Technically challenged tonight.
Well, thank you again for your summary of this incredible body of work and getting us a refresher and a snapshot into all the discussions that have been happening and all the feedback that City Council and others have been providing. And again, I'd like to make sure everybody has a chance to ask their questions and provide their input. Lucrecia, I see you have a hand raised. Was that from this, or was that from an earlier question? Are you, would you like to go ahead and kick us off with your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you for that, Susan. So it's a question comment, normally kind of like what I normally do. So for me, when we state that 77% of the 7% who live in poverty are people of color, I think it's important, and I don't know if this is typical in these sorts of documents, to kind of give substance to who the people are that make up that 77% of the 7%, right? Because my fear is always that individuals can fill in those gaps of information for themselves with stereotypes, right? And so it would be important for me to understand, like, I think it's really essential to know that people are working poor, meaning they're not sitting around waiting for somebody to give them quote unquote a handout, right? Because that's the rhetoric that we hear when we hear pushback, right? And so I think I would like, and I don't know, again, Monica, it would be up to you and Hannah to tell us if that's typical, right? Where we kind of discern who is our community, who are the people in need, and give it more of a holistic view, in my opinion, so that people aren't just kind of clumped into this kind of like these others, right? And I don't know how to do that. So that's why it's a comment question.
Thank you, Lucrecia. May I ask a clarifying question? So are you perhaps is your suggestion for us to add additional information to what is in the plan now to that section on where we address those who are disproportionately impacted. So perhaps just add more information in that section a little bit.
Right. Like, for example, I like the idea of understanding that that there are people in there who are working poor. I want to know, is this chronic poverty versus situational poverty, right? And if we don't know the difference between those two, chronic poverty is generational. It's, you know, where people just really can't get out of poverty versus situational, where you could be like a working student, right? Where at the end you will have the means to kind of pull yourself up and out of that situation. And I guess I just want to humanize more those numbers rather than just have, you know, this kind of empty shell that can be filled in with any sort of information that is maybe even inaccurate.
Great suggestion. Thank you so much.
And I
And,
see
and
Anna's
Susan,
hand up. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I apologize, Susan. I don't know if you noticed the chat. Pat also had a comment or question.
Let me see. For some reason, my chat. Okay. Thank you. And I also saw Anna's hand up. May I also ask though, Lucrecia, before we let you go, did you have any other comments, questions, or was there anything else that you wanted to provide at this point? We'll have a chance to come back, but just asking.
No, I think that was it. And it was, you know, when those numbers came up, those were the questions that came up for me. But I think it's appropriate for where we are right now. So,
Okay, thank you. All right, if we could go to Anna next. I saw Anna raise her hand, and then to Pat. And then anybody else, feel free to either use the hand raise icon, put in chat, or you can also try raising your hand, although it's a little bit harder to see people's faces. So, but whatever works for you. So Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Susan. Because of the extent of, you know, I'm here day in, day out, so I'm gonna find spelling or grammar stuff. I can email that later because that will take too much time. But going on Lucrecia's thoughts, one note that I have is there's a lot of percentages in this document, but for example, I would like to know, and I did the calculations of some of them, what's the, for example, 20% of 40,662 people. So how much that is represents the working poor, the seniors that are not mentioned so much, which is the other part of my comment. I personally think that we're putting too much weight on homeless, and we're forgetting that we have seniors, that we have disabled, that we have working poor people that I would like to see mentioned here, how we're gonna address their needs because they're not all the same. Let me go real quick here. And because I've been in several grant cycles, some cycles have been more focused on local, others on regional. So how are we gonna go with this? And who's gonna be in charge of attracting new agencies to provide services? That we a little bit from the regional and stay more on the local, which we can focus and use our monies from the city, because there's 16 cities and we don't know. Excuse me. Sometimes people apply to just one city while others apply to 12, 14 cities to get more money. And excuse me. Let's see. I'm going to somebody else's and I'll come back later. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that. And so Pat, if you wouldn't mind, you're next for your comments and questions.
Sure. And oddly enough, one of my first questions was on the disaggregation of the percentages that were given, 7.8 of the Issaquah population, right, disaggregated. What part of it is working poor, same as to the 77% that are non-white, same comments as Lucretia. So, and also I might have missed it, but I was wondering what I'm seeing numbers, we provide numbers of X number of homeless, for instance, were helped, X numbers of poor were helped. But do we have a metric or a way to show over time that the help might is not just punctual? Is do we have a way to show that we have done so that homelessness has decreased over time? So maybe the first year not, but in year 5, we have helped X number. Well, let's say in year 1, we have helped X number with food, with housing. But in year 5, we have taken homelessness from 10% to 2%, for instance. Thank you.
Thank you. And Susan, are we okay? Would you like us to answer some of the questions that
Sure,
were?
absolutely.
So I'm gonna go back to Anna then, and I hope I took notes and I got all the questions. Anna, if not, just let me know. So for one of the questions was about, you know, I believe if I understood you correctly, about the percentages, and perhaps also not providing not only the percentages, but also the numbers, calculate the numbers with that. So that's easy. If that, did I understand that correctly? That's easy. That's easy fix. We can definitely address that. Great comment and a recommendation with the seniors and disabled and working poor. While we do describe and we do have a lot of information more than we can add for each of the populations, we can certainly do that. We were actually talking about that as we were also trying to keep the strategic plan somewhat content to a certain limit. And so we were debating on whether or not to add some information as an addendum or in the content. We will go back and kind of like review. On one end, definitely we want to address and not feel like we are forgetting or missing any of the populations. Since this was a strategic plan, I think what we also prioritized some of the needs, right? So at the community level, that's why you're going to see what we heard. We prioritize behavioral health and physical health for all ages and for all populations, because that was widely spread. It wasn't just working poor or homeless or others, right? Whereas then the next priority for us was homelessness. Is not that seniors or those who are disabled are not important, but I think in the needs in trying to what we need to tend to, that seems a little bit higher. But at the same time, we hear the feedback from the community, like to make sure that we don't come across as that's the only thing that we are going to focus on. So definitely we are going to adjust a little bit to make sure that the other populations are also called out. So thank you so much for that as well. I think you had asked Anna about the grant cycle and then the local versus regional. And so definitely the intent with the Issaquah Human Services Strategic Plan is to focus on local services, and that's why probably you saw one of the action items really to encourage other local services, because I think at the regional level there's a wide variety of services, but locally in Issaquah, not so much. So definitely the focus will be more on local rather than regional. And then who's tracking all of that? I think we will be the ones tracking that. Yours truly, Hannah, and myself, and the rest of the team. And I think I might have answered, hopefully, your questions, Anna, before I move to Pat's question. I missed something. Tell me. Oh, I cannot hear you.
I think you went on mute, Anna. There we go.
Sorry if I was coughing earlier. Wrong button. who's gonna be in charge of going to these agencies that are not represented locally? Because it would be nice if we cannot find a big building or something that was looked at before, to have, different offices, maybe have a satellite staff person from each agency, and, reduce the amount of people and space needed for the time being, and eventually see how they grow, how they fit into our needs, then expand that. But years ago, we were looking at a big bunch of different agencies like the Redmond place, but given the issue that we couldn't find one at that point, maybe start with one staff or two staff from each agency and bring them into a satellite office here in Issaquah.
Yes, so exactly. What I hear is like definitely start small, start somewhere and then grow that, right? So yes, that's exactly, and that's what we are trying to call out, and that's going to be basically our job, our team's job in the next few years, to really try to engage with those organizations and looking at what's realistic and what's not, and trying to make progress on that. So yes, thank you for that. And then thank you. And then with your permission, Pat, I think you had a similar question about percentages for us to dive a little bit deeper within those percentages, like and to identify what part of those what part of the population living in poverty, what part of that is working poor. And so definitely we are going to try to dive deeper into the statistics. We are limited to what's available at the Census Bureau level. And sometimes if that doesn't go into much depth, we are concerned about using other data that might not be so reliable. So to the extent that we are going to find information, we are going to go to, and we have some anecdotal data from our interviews and community engagement, but then we want to also be careful, since that's not statistically reliable, on kind of like how we extrapolate that information. So I think that's the challenge a little bit that we've been having, but definitely we are going to try, both you and Lucrecia provided great input. We are going to try to tell that story a little bit more.
Monica, I think a way to avoid that, having to look into the census and spend this too much, is what I meant was the right next to the percentage, put how many, for example, if the 40,000 people from Issaquah is 250, and that 17% represents, well, 350% of, people of the population, to make, too many details that this would be like an encyclopedia size kind of thing. Thank you.
Certainly, Anna, and definitely that's definitely something that's doable, and that's easily done. That's definitely doable. I apologize. What I was trying to explain is just providing more in-depth information about characteristics that we might not have. So thank you. And then for the metrics, last comment, Pat, we are going to work with our finance department, with our data analyst, in identifying the metrics and more in-depth metrics, and she's going to help us track. Definitely, we love your input about homelessness. We are actually working already on identifying specific metrics in homelessness. Probably you're not going to see those spelled out in the strategic plan, but those will be reflected then in our work plan specifically. So thank you for that. Great input. And I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. So I think next up, I'm watching the chat. Looks like Sarah, if you're able to make your comments.
Thank you. I was so glad to hear you just talk about the involvement with the community partners meeting, because I think the biggest thing missing for me was the why. So as I was reading through the plan and reading about the various problems, what I wanted to see more addressed was the reasons why. So for example, not having providers who could communicate in culturally specific ways. I agree that that's not a good thing, but we, without addressing the reasons why that problem exists, I worry that the money won't go to the right place. And I have an example in a cautionary tale, which is in my role as a foster parent. I received an email from Ross Hunter, the DCYF secretary, and it was at the beginning of this year that DCYF invested $260 million in the childcare industry because we listened to you, foster parents, and we know that childcare is difficult for you. So we distributed these grants. Immediately, the backlash on the foster parents page was, that didn't do a thing for me. Because the problem is that the state's reimbursement rate is so low. But so DCYF made this grand gesture. We heard you. We put all this money towards the problem. It didn't go towards the problem and towards solving it. So I share that cautionary tale as just hopefully that when you're talking to those community partners, why don't they have a satellite office in Issaquah already? You know, is it because of is it not because they don't want to serve our community, but is it because of there's no space, like Anna was talking about, or the rent rates are too high, or the population isn't high enough for the communities that they serve, and they can't make it financially feasible because of the reimbursements they receive from the state. That's been my problem with finding for behavioral health therapists, just personally, anecdotally. I drive to Kent a lot, both for elder care and for foster care services. And I don't know if it's because there's not enough others around here, and that's just a larger population center. I don't know what the reason is, but I hope that during those community feedback sessions from those partners already providing those services, I just would think that in a generally free market economy, that if it was viable to provide those in Issaquah already, it would be done. And so what Congressperson DeMichelle mentioned about, I listened to all the meeting, but she mentioned about advertising a larger pot because maybe that's because she thinks that it's about reimbursement, but whatever it is, that if that's the motivator, I think that's where the money needs to go. And I didn't get the sense that those root causes were always being addressed in the plan. And so anyway, I would be very interested to see a lot of the results of those community listening sessions with those community partners. Also, I would like to mention, I saw all those great interview partners. I noticed that they were all probably people who were already receiving funding in general. And you mentioned on the city council call several times that there are smaller groups that you would like to know or find or partner with. And I think that feedback would be very relevant as well. Just people who don't already have skin in the game. For example, I know like Young Life does a lot of work. There's Christian organizations like Young Life that do a lot of work with like the special needs community, or Caring and Sharing Hands, and individuals who work with even our local Tent City community. Like I go twice a month, but like it's just maybe those people who don't have skin in the game. I really enjoyed seeing all the various anecdotes too from the different people. I wanted to call out one that kind of bothered me though. I'm sorry. On page 12, Barbie Collins's dream about providing health or mental health services to everybody. I think that's a great dream, but the way it's presented on the page, it looks like that's the goal of the whole plan, and that might not be everyone's goal. And also with the person who was sharing on page 32 in the YWCA in the Highlands, it conflates the color of skin and being victims of crime without really spelling that out. It said that people are accused of crime because of the color of their skin, but that person didn't claim that in their quote. And so I just wanted to be really careful that people's stories are reflected as their personal experiences and maybe not reflective of everyone's. I really enjoyed digging into this. As you can tell, I have many pages of notes. I think I can stop for now. I'll just stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Very, very good input. Very much appreciated. And we would love to also, if you would like to continue with that, we can set up a separate time with you. I know Hannah and I just had earlier this week a meeting with some of the community members or community organizations who do not receive funding, but would love to get from you perhaps even some contact information, some specific to engage with others as well. So would love to, if that's okay with you, to connect directly also.
Thank you, Sarah. Very helpful. And next in the chat, Manny has some comments.
Yes, thank you, Susan. Yeah, I just want to look at the slide that had the financial impact, and was wondering, is the goal a percentage of the city funds, or are we looking at a specific amount? And that, will it change or move, or what's that about? And I did like the wording of the vision with words including welcoming, inclusive, respected, and shared responsibility. I thought that was great wording along that line. And I did notice also, going deeper into the presentation here, that we do have some numbers, like the number of unsheltered in 2019 was 5%, and 2020 was 8%. And I like to see that fall up. I think it was mentioned earlier about those numbers for unemployed and working poor. That's my comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Manny. And I want to make sure that I understood your question about the financial impact. Although I believe, let me comment on that first, and then you can tell me if that touches or if you would like to continue. The strategic plan, intentionally at the very high level, we did not dive deep into providing a lot of financial information other than the high level buckets. Our understanding of the strategic plan is that it should be kind of like the aspirational 5-year plan, and then each year, depending on what are the specific action items, those will be reflected in the budget and then the work plan. So those would be addressed in the budget. We will, though, come back and do provide some big bucket budget items. They can change, of course, from year to year, because as you also saw, we put some revision dates that are not just 5-year out, but there are some revision dates that are going to be 2 years or 3 years out. So then when we do the first revision, we want to look at, okay, what is that we accomplished so far? What is it that we learned that then perhaps that will change the funding amount that's needed? Also, for example, Sarah's comments, some of the things you saw there, two, if I recall correctly, 2 strategic action items. One is that we are going to engage with 2 new providers each quarter, that we are going to work with them exactly on what Sarah was mentioning. We are going to work on saying, okay, what is it that what's the reason why you're not already in Issaquah? What would make this viable? And so based on some of the information that we are going to learn, some of the financial needs will change. So does that answer a little bit your question?
Yes, I'm just wondering how you were going to approach the council on the big picture. Basically, is if you're looking at, you want X amount per year, or percentage wise, or
Yeah, so we will provide, we are gonna provide to City Council, we are providing some visual amounts, and we are gonna provide some large bucket estimated numbers. And then we are also gonna have a separate conversation with them about the grant funding process. So it's gonna be a 2-step process, because within that, I think there were 2 questions. One was about how much will the entire budget be for the strategic plan, and also there was a separate conversation on the grant. So that's currently, we are going to work on that internally with the administration. and we are going to prepare an answer for council for the February 15 meeting, which you will have hopefully an overview of that on the 9th or the 10th. That's still in the works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so just making sure that everybody has a chance to share. Claire, Trish, either of you care to make any comments or have any questions?
I can, Trish, if you don't mind, I can go first. So yeah, so I also want to add my compliments on this. I read all 67 pages and just really appreciated the hard work and just, yeah, a real shout out first to the dedicated staff that put this together. And I think it just shows with all the growth in the staffing and human services, there's a lot of gas in the tank, and you guys have this beautiful energy to make this really prominent, and I'm really excited about that. When I was looking at it, a couple things jumped out at me, and they were kind of more big picture things. One of the things that jumped out at me was this thing that I've heard, and maybe somebody else has heard of it too. It's called the STAR model, and it's 5 areas that have to be aligned to successfully shape decisions, behaviors, organizations, things like that. And when I was thinking about this plan, I was thinking what's really awesome is that you have those SMART goals, they're measurable. And I loved, starting on page 38, you have the date, for each, strategic goal, there's the date, and there's a real consistency about that. That's in the where are we going section, in case anyone's looking. But I guess what I was wondering is, part of the thing in the STAR model that jumped out at me was like the motivation and the accountability piece, So in this strategic plan, how are we incentivizing, motivating, shaping the people who have to work with you to bring these goals about? And to me, that was something that I was thinking a little bit about. So I would love to send you like a little information about the STAR model. I'm not an expert on it. It's just something that I have just started using for my work. But if I can just take 2 minutes and just say, it's a star, 5-point star, and there's people, which is like, what kinds of people with what skills does this going to require? There's strategy, what's your strategic goal and how do they drive where you're going? There's structure, like what kind of structures are you going to build around this that'll make it lasting, that'll create some permanence. There's processes and there's rewards. And to me, it's just when I look at a strategic plan like this, it's so awesome. And it's a lot of goals, but there's like this whole other shelter that we have to build around it to protect this plan and help it move forward, And so that was kind of my thought, was building in a better structure so that this plan can move. And then no, I think that's all I can say for right now. But I really appreciated the work that you did, and I thought it was really exciting. And I appreciate listening to everyone's comments too.
Yeah. Great conversation for sure tonight. Thank you so much, Claire. Definitely would love to follow up and get more information from you on the STAR model and see how we may incorporate specifically the notes on motivation and accountability, as you mentioned. Thank you for that. And thank you so much, commissioners, for taking the time. I know that everybody's busy. This is a volunteer-based commission, and I know that reading to 65 pages was not probably just a 10-minute task. And I know it because I worked on those 65 pages. So thank you.
I agree. I think the comments are especially thoughtful tonight. So thank you, Trish. You were gonna share your thoughts?
You still can't hear me.
A little bit.
Okay, I'm just gonna be really brief. Sorry, I don't know what's going on, but this is so great. First of all, Monica and I'm so impressed with all the energy and thought that all the commissioners have put into this. So thank you. I'm gonna say because you can't hear me.
We could hear that.
Yeah, we could hear that. Can we keep saying we want to hear more of that? I'm just joking, but yes, thank you so much, Trish.
At the study session, and I was so proud of Monica and Amir and Hannah. You were recognized, and you know, glad you were on a well-deserved vacation and couldn't be here. Yeah, but yeah, the council is so happy and pleased with Monica's team. So it's just a great group to be a part of. Can you hear everything I'm saying?
I could hear it.
And I promise I'll fix my speaker situation. So yeah, great job, you guys.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you, Trish.
So I actually had a couple of thoughts too, and I know we're getting a little bit late in the agenda, but Monica, if it's okay with you, I'll add a couple thoughts. So, and this is building off many of the observations and comments that other folks have had. And as I listened to the conversation at the study session, and I'm specifically in the agenda packet, I was focused on that, I think what you call plan on a page, which was slide 10, I think, where it started with the black and white slide that you said that you were going to try to work on the graphics that kind of rolled everything up into one page. I was thinking about like what an audacious plan, like just aspirational, bold, impressive. And then, then the other thoughts start to come to mind. Ooh, scary, expensive. How are we going to do this? and the thing that comes to mind immediately is priorities. So I think I sort of had two comments. One is I think Monica, you addressed a little bit earlier the whole sort of implicit or explicit prioritization of focusing on the most important needs. I do think we have to be a little clearer, if we can be, about who we're targeting. And by who, I really mean kind of the bucket of needs, not necessarily the individual people. But we've had this long-standing debate within the Human Services Commission, as Monica and Hannah well know, and Anna and Trish and others, about do we take the funds that we have and make sure that everybody kind of gets a little piece of it? Do we sort of, one concept is peanut butter spread. Do we give every agency who is doing good works an opportunity to take a little bit of the funding and see what they can do with it? Or do we concentrate it and say, listen, we've got these really important problems to solve. We can't do it with little dribs and drabs. We really have to kind of focus in on the most important things to get done. Really hard conversation, but let's concentrate it and go after the big wins. And I got to tell you personally, I've been on both sides of that over time. It's really difficult to decide. And I think the thing that really drove it home to me has been watching the response to homelessness in the greater Seattle area and certainly in our community over the past several years. And despite best efforts, it just feels like the various strategies that we've tried haven't really been as effective as we had hoped. Then you add the pandemic on top of it, and then you have the large group of at-risk people who then became homeless or either temporarily or their situation worsened. And it just feels like we need a new approach and a new plan and a new strategy. And so I guess what I'm saying is a long-winded way of saying I feel like picking up the problem of people who are dealing with homelessness currently and setting it over to the side and saying what we're really talking about here in our Human Services Commission and in the Human Services Strategic Plan is the portion of homelessness that prevents homelessness, that stabilizes folks who may be, on the brink of experiencing homelessness, that targets the people who may be like on the edge of one bad problem away from either losing their home, losing their job, not having the resources that they need. And that's really where we as a city can make a difference and sort of spread the dollars that we have to use to the greatest need and the greatest good and the greatest number of people. So that gets to the comment that was made, I think, by one of the city council members about don't forget the working poor. Those folks, also need the resources, the physical health, the behavioral health, the access to, housing security, the cultural support. And I feel like we could have a greater impact if we could do that. And at the same time say, as a city, of course, we're supporting whatever needs to be done to address homelessness, but it's a bigger issue than just Issaquah. It's a regional approach. It may need to be addressed through alternate means other than the Human Services Commission grant process. It may need to be regional, statewide, federal funding. And I'm just wondering if that might be a reasonable approach to do both the sort of spreading the money to where the most people can take the benefit, and then removing the core of the sort of the handful of people. I hate to say it, it's not just a handful, but it's a handful of people that could really use every single dollar that the city can spend on them, and then we wouldn't have enough money for anything else. And so again, that's a long-winded way of saying, in this human services strategic plan, can we feel good about taking a position on which way to go? Because we've always been kind of walking both sides of the fence on that. Spend it on where the greatest need is, which of course, the homeless, but then also spend it on all these other valuable programs that we heard through the community listening and that also need to be addressed. Because the other aspect of the conversation that I heard on city council is, how are we going to fund this thing? And I respect your comment earlier, Monica, about how staff is going back and trying to put some sort of, it's not the responsibility of the strategic plan to have that detail, but to have kind of like order of magnitude. It would be, I think, great to give city council just a little bit of a roadmap to say, we think we can fund the overarching community needs, the physical and behavioral health, the language and access, and the community resources within the scope of what we currently do with the human services grant. So order of magnitude, give us about the same amount of money. We think we can accomplish those. The one that we can't do within the current, order of magnitude of what we have is address homelessness. And so if we were to sort of carve that out, that could give them some ideas on how they can think about prioritizing this beyond what the Human Services Commission does, but to larger role of the city services, role of the the state, role of the region, and basically get us some help. Because my worry is that, again, you've got so much in here and it's so aspirational, but like I think immediately we're going to run into problems with making headway on these issues because we're going to run out of money really fast. So that's my my thought.
Thank you very much, Susan. And such great comments. And your comment made me think of going back to what we were also discussing earlier with Manny with the 3 buckets. And I'm gonna give you a sneak peek of how we were envisioning about going about that. So if you remember those 3 buckets, we said there are gonna be initiatives that are gonna be addressed just with staff resources, initiatives that are gonna be addressed with grants, and then initiatives that need additional money. And so again, we work with that designer team to create some visuals for those 3 buckets. And then what we hope to do to put those visuals next to each of those specific action items. And so basically you're going to be able to have a visual and say, oh, okay, so this action item, it's going to be addressed with staffing resources only. This action item, it's going to be addressed with grants and staffing resources. This action item actually needs money. So then our hope is that, just like you said, that in the end, council and the community is going to be able to clearly see which specific action items need additional money. And just as a high level, along with homelessness, definitely that's one. I think the second one that I believe that's going to need additional money, it is that multi-service center, right? So those I think are going to be the 2 big bucket items that need additional money, that kind of like, and I think that's going to be kind of like clear in the final draft. And so I hope kind of like that aligns a little bit with you, but I also loved your comments because within just the human services grants, kind of like for us also to focus on what can those grants provide, right? And what should the focus be? So yeah, so great comments, feedbacks. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Anna's
hand. But before I call on Anna, just want to make a note that it is 8 o'clock. Are commissioners able to hang on for just a few more minutes? Or Monica, what is your suggestion? Should we continue on?
I believe on my end that we are towards the end, just finalizing comments. So probably I think we should be done in the next 5 minutes, if that's okay with you. We just need to talk about the next meeting, I believe.
Okay. Let me go to Anna. She had a hand raised.
Monica, concerning the 3 buckets of money, I would, from parts that I read in the document, you guys are thinking of hiring more people. We have a 4th bucket of money reserved for extra staff needed that would help us guide this strategic plan and see it come to life easier, but not put it all on Hannah's shoulders, because you guys have a lot and we appreciate all the hard work. But if it's gonna come to reality, maybe can we put a 4th bucket and separate some money to fund that extra city staff, or to address another agency, for example, Consejo Counseling? Hey, we have this money. Do you have a staff you can bring to Issaquah, and we'll fund that for 1 year, see how it goes. And if it goes well, can expand with grants and stuff because they get more money than we do, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. So I know we're close on time here, and I believe that Monica and Hannah are going to give us some information about what to expect next. We're going to talk about the meeting in February, as previously mentioned, and then Monica, or Hannah, any direction to the commissioners on how they could provide additional thoughts or perspectives from this evening that they would like to share back with you.
Anna, would you like to take this part?
Yeah, Lucrecia, are you okay if I go, or did you need to say something before we move forward?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Lucrecia's hand.
I'm just double checking something because I just want to clarify that I believe that the calendar told me that this meeting went till 8:30. And so I'm just making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of like the time.
Well, our meeting always goes from 6:30 to 8. The calendar WebEx invite may have been extended, but we
Got it.
Yeah, thanks for double checking though.
Okay, thank you.
So moving forward, our next steps, there's two things. Great conversation tonight. I was taking some furious notes, and I really appreciate that. I feel like this is a passionate group, and Monica and I would love to continue conversations one-on-one. Please email us, and we would be happy to schedule that. Again, until February 4th is our cutoff date for receiving feedback. So just want to put that out there if anybody else has other comments, or you are welcome to email us as well. Please keep them coming. They are very valuable to us. The next thing that we have is to really determine when our next commission meeting is. This will be a special meeting as we are looking to have it in replacement of the regular meeting on the 16th. So the available dates that we're looking at, it will be at the same time from 6:30 to 8 p.m. We're looking either at Wednesday the 9th, February 9th, or Thursday, February 10th. Again, the times would be from 6:30 to 8. And the purpose would be to be able to review the comments that we're receiving and review the closer to final draft of our strategic plan before we take it to council meeting on the 15th. So I'd like to take this time to go ahead, Monica.
Show of hands, if you
Yeah.
don't mind looking at your calendars and trying to see what would work best for you. Let's say February 9th. That is on a Wednesday.
Wednesday, yes. So yeah, so take a minute just to look at your calendar. We have Wednesday, February 9th. And then we have Thursday, February 10th. So if you can raise your hand if you prefer Wednesday, February 9th. I see sorry, I will say the names. I have Susan, Claire, Manny, Pat, Sarah, and Trish. I do not have Anna or Lucrecia.
And
Okay,
if we can do either one, do you want us to raise for both?
Yes, that'd be great. Okay, and then if you can raise for Thursday the 10th, February 10th, we've got, sorry, Lucrecia, I don't know what those mean. That means.
Oh, I thought you said raise both hands, both dates
You're
work.
Okay, I'm seeing there's more availability overall for February 9th. Any objections? Okay. Great. Well, then we will send out some email reminders that we'll have a special Human Service Commission meeting on February 9th. Again, 6:30 to 8. The very last thing in other business, if you don't mind, Susan, I'll just get to this quickly, is recruitment. So that will be happening here very soon, towards the end of January. We'll have more information, but ultimately what we're looking for is just for each individual to let us know what your plan is for next year, whether your term is up, you plan to reapply, or if you plan to stay, or if for any reason anybody needs to leave. Just be in communication with Monica and I about what your next plans are. And if you have any further questions, just reach out to us as well. We can just have a one-on-one conversation about that. Monica, anything else you want to add to the recruitment piece?
No, there will be information coming up next month. As some of you may know, recruitment for boards and commissions starts at the beginning of January, the end of January, beginning of February. We will go through interviews in March, April, at the end of April terms, and then new terms begin in May. For the Human Services Commission, we only have 2 positions that I believe expire this year. So if you do not plan on reapplying, let us know, or either way, we would appreciate letting us know. Actually, yeah, we do have 3 positions expire, I believe 2 regular positions and 1 alternate. And I know we heard from some of you, but not from everyone. So thank you for that.
All right. Any other business, Hannah? Is that?
Not on my end. That's the last bit.
Okay, and just a final check-in with commissioners, any other business that you'd like to discuss before we adjourn for this evening? I can't see everybody, but I'm not seeing any hands. All right. Well, thank you again for the incredible comments and just the value that you all are bringing with your perspectives on this issue. I think this has really just been a great opportunity not only to see how this work has progressed, but to kind of hear from everyone's perspective. And I really feel like we're doing an incredible job as a team to support Hannah and Monica and their team in really doing some groundbreaking work here. So thank you all for your thoughts. And so again, we will our next meeting, Hannah, will be one more time, please.
Will be Wednesday, February 9th at 6:30 p.m. Many
Okay.
emails to come.
All right. Thank you
Sure.
very much. And so I'd like to adjourn the meeting of the Issaquah Human Services Commission on January 19th, 2022 at 8:10 p.m. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you, everyone. Have a great
good
evening.
Have a great evening.